Welcome to the My Thing Is This podcast. I'm your host, Troy Sampson. And each week, we talk about what's going on in the world. And as we talk about that, I let you know my thing is this about what's going on in the world. Again, I'm your host, Troy Sampson. Welcome to the My Thing Is This podcast. Stay tuned, buckle up, and enjoy the ride. Happy Sunday, everybody. This is Troy Sampson on the My Thing Is This podcast. I'm your host this week. This is the week ending February 6, 2022. We got a lot to talk about today on the podcast. I actually got two guests in the studio today that we're going to be talking about our thing is this. And we're like, not my thing is this, our thing is this. They're going to be sharing their thoughts and opinions on some topics we're going to be talking about. So we got two guests on today with us. They're connected via Zoom because I haven't figured out how to get this thing on video yet. I'll figure that out later on, but I got them on Zoom and they're connected to my equipment through that way. And so the first guest I want to introduce, we had him on last week, my brother in Christ, my brother in love, Mr. Darryl Wilson, all the way from the ATL area outside Atlanta, Georgia. Just to recap, Darryl is the senior director of operations for a large company outside the metropolitan area or around the metropolitan area of Atlanta. And then of course I got another guest. This is a first time guest. It's probably one of the biggest fans because every time I do a podcast, he called me up talking about, man, this helped me get me through my joint. Every time I go to work, this gets me through my joint. And that's my brother in love. We've known each other. This brother I've known for, gosh, it's over 40 years probably. I guess pretty much from kindergarten until now, and we graduated high school together. Of course, I'm married to his beautiful cousin, and we like brothers, man. I won't share no stories on here, especially the bike store. I won't share that. But my brother Gavin Milligan is on the call with us today, so I'm gonna give you a round of applause here, real quick, brothers.
All right.
And bring y'all in. Welcome to the My Thing Is This podcast, brothers.
Well, thanks for having us, Troy.
Yeah, glad to be here. One thing I will say, I looked up to both of y'all brothers coming up to school. So let me just put that plug in. You guys are a couple years older than me, but always admired and kind of looked up to both of y'all as you were navigating your high school career. So I'm glad to be on here with two of Groove City finest.
I know that's right. See, hey, listen, for anybody that don't know, we represent the 21613. We represent the 21613. A lot of people, when you said Groove City, a lot of people, Groove City, that's Cambridge, Maryland, man. Groove City Live, baby. We used to go up top. I also remember going up top as a young kid, Gentleman Joe's and Legacy and Elk Home and all those businesses and stuff like that. Even back in the day, even before those, we used to go around at Edgewood Avenue to the clubhouse.
Cheetah's Pub,
all that stuff. But I'm just so thankful and blessed to have you brothers on, man. I'm just trying to, add a little voice to the world. A lot of people have podcasts, but I think, okay, well, I can do one too. I mean, we're just getting on here just talking, and it's all about just having a conversation. Really, I used to think this was going to be super hard to do. I mean, I heard so many people, they got engineers, they got all this, they got all that, but I found a small piece of equipment that I found on Amazon that allows me to do it, allows me to upload my stuff, my content to Anchor and Spotify. And that's it. So now I'm going to try to figure out the video piece of it and continue this thing and share with the world. I got a couple other ideas for separate podcasts. As you guys know, I'm a special needs dad. My son is living with autism, ADHD, and special needs is near and dear to my heart. Matter of fact, yesterday, big plug, the First Baptist Church of Glenard, my church, we were doing the packing of the bags, gift bags for Night to Shine. Tim Tebow does a prom every year, the Valentine's Day weekend, that Friday, for individuals living with disabilities, where everybody's king and queen, and we give a lavish, spread. Everybody comes dressed up in before the pandemic, we have it at the church. Everybody would dress up in their tuxedos and their prom gowns, and whether you're able-bodied, able to walk in or in a wheelchair, everybody dressed up. I mean, these are individuals with special needs with different types of disabilities, and we just there to serve them, man, and give them a good time. And one of the things that really blessed me about that is watching a look not only of the participants, we call them VIPs, but their parents. Their parents come, their parents get to go into a separate overflow room, and they get to see everything that's going on the big screen in the overflow room. We serve them dinner and drinks as well, but it's a full course dinner for our participants. We got music and entertainment. We got a dance room, we got a photo booth room, so many rooms for them to just navigate through. We had a shoe shine room. I remember serving in the shoe shine room one year. Shoe shine / makeup room, where we got local makeup artists volunteer their services and time to come in and do makeup for the young ladies that come, and we do shoe shines for the young men that come. And there's a coat check, right? It's a big thing. And the last year and this year again, it's going to be virtual. So that's the one thing that's really, not so great about it, is because it's going to be virtual again this year. And so we were packing the bags. So I was at the church all day yesterday doing that and having people set up to deliver the bags to our participants and their families. And so as a matter of fact, I got to call my family today after we get done and set up a time where I can drop their bag off before Wednesday. But it's a great event. And Tim Tebow, Foundation has put this on. Big ups to Tim Tebow. And speaking of Tim Tebow, former NFL football player, former University of Florida Heisman Trophy winner, we're going to segue right into football. And the big story this week was Coach, or as Mr. Asia used to say, Coach Brian Flores, or former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores, made the news when he dropped this bombshell on the NFL after being fired, and also seeing, actually what tipped it off for him was being congratulated by Bill Belichick for the Giants job when Bill Belichick got the wrong Brian. Because, Brian Flores was on Bill Belichick's staff, and also Brian Daboll, who's been named the head coach of the Giants, was on that staff too. And I think a couple of days before that Thursday that Flores was supposed to go interview with the Giants or take a second interview, he got a text from Bill Belichick saying, congratulations. Yeah, saying congratulations on getting the Giants job. And they were going back and forth. He was like, are you sure? He said, my interview ain't until Thursday. He was like, are you sure? And then he finally asked the question, are you talking about Brian Flores or Brian Daboll? And when Belichick realized in a text message, he sent in the text message, oh, I effed up. And so that's what Brian Flores is saying that led to him filing this lawsuit. But I want to get your guys' thoughts on this lawsuit and just the state of the Rooney Rule with the NFL. Gav, you go first.
Hey, well, I got to tell you, the Rooney Rule and law, okay, was established because of exactly what Flores is talking about. The lack of participation, the lack of interviewing processes that go on within the NFL, and his lawsuit it brings a light to the machine right now that is not operating correctly.
Okay,
yeah.
I agree with that, and hey, that's on point. Darryl, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I was listening to that interview with Dungy and Rich McKay, the president and CEO of Falcons.
Okay.
Right. and he was part of the group that established the Rooney Rule.
Mm-hmm.
And basically he was talking about, well, the Rooney Rule was established to slow the process down, because back in the day, all the owners would do is call about 4 or 5 coaches, right? Or 4 or 5, well-known coaches,
Mm-hmm.
and be like, hey, do you know this guy? Do you know that guy? What can you tell me about him, right? So, and then they made a decision right off the bat, right? With that, the Rooney Rule was established to kind of slow that down and allow people, to get in front of these owners and in front of the GMs and everyone to, state their case, right? But as Rich McKay said, the Rooney Rule got out of whack, right? From the way it was originally established, right? And they went back to this fast pace, let me call a coach and find out about these guys and that sort of thing, and make decisions upon that. But I think, right, I think they messed up, right? I think, the fact that Belichick knew, right, he really, to me, you let the cat out of the bag, what they say, but the fact that he knew something about the hiring process before Brian Flores even was interviewed is an issue, right? So that kind of validates what Rich McKay was saying. Hey, we used to call up coaches and just find out about these individuals. Well, yeah, they probably called up Bill Belichick and talked to him more about these 2 coaches than they needed, right? Probably even went so far as to say, yeah, we're leaning on, the other Brian as the head coach and all that. So that's my take. I think Belichick, shouldn't have known that much detail. He should only been a resource or a reference, right? Just like we all have, you put your references down, they call your old boss and get kind of some insights. But I think he's too ingrained in that process.
Well, and both of you guys make very, very excellent observations. Here's some things that I came across in addition, just, kind of paying attention to what they're saying and what they're saying in the media. A couple of things stand out for me. Number one, the NFL immediately dismissed it as if it was BS. That's the first thing they did, and they shot themselves in the foot with that. The second thing is that it took several days after he went on ESPN and all this other stuff. All of a sudden, all those teams that he's accusing, and even Hugh Jackson, who accused the Browns of asking him to tank for money too, all of them waited several days before they decided to respond and say it's not true and this is BS. And Elway and them said, well, when we came in off a flight, we were just shoveled a little bit. He mistook that for da 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 da. Here's what I look. Here's what I'm seeing, and I'm gonna give you a couple quick points here and try to make them as fast as I can, so we don't belabor this point, so we can move on to our next set of topics. The first thing is it's a legitimate lawsuit. That's the first thing. The second thing is, in order for this lawsuit to really do some damage, he has to get other coaches to join the lawsuit. Number 3, now the players, even though they are covered under the NFLPA, because there's no union for the coaches, the stars have to start speaking up now, right? Because the most radical thing they can do, right, is start taking a knee again or sit down. But it's going to take your stars. And when I say stars speaking out, right, this is where we talk about, because this is about race. This is where race in this country really, really shows you where people sit, right? How many players that don't look like Brian Flores have come out in his defense? The only one I've heard of or seen was Rob Minkovic, and that was because he was on ESPN, and he spoke highly of Brian Flores and said he stands with Brian Flores because Brian Flores was his first coach. But he said he thinks the world of Brian Flores because Brian Flores basically helped him survive in New England because he was on the borderline of possibly being a practice squad guy, but Brian Flores coached him up on the special teams, and his career ended the way it did, which he ended up being a starter, winning Super Bowls, stuff like that. But you don't hear anybody else. Where's Tom? Even Tom Brady's retired. Where's Tom Brady at? You never, I'll give you an example, and I hate to go here with this, but there's several white players in the league that are dating black women. Travis Kelce being one of them. Where's Travis Kelce on this? Is he going to speak up? Is he going to speak up for Eric Bieniemy? And so what you have here, you have a system in place where people are going to do and hire who's familiar with them, who they're familiar, who they share something with, right? So when you start looking at the landscape, what is this really doing? Then here's the other thing I just found out just by it's 2 YouTube videos I saw over the weekend. One was Stephen A. Smith. And this was the one time I actually listened to him because I think Stephen A. Smith is whatever. But he said, he pointed out to, who was it? It was the big swagoo, Marcus Spears, and I think the other one might have been Ryan. No, it was Bomani Jones. He said, I'm going to say this to you guys. I'm going to let you guys have the floor. He said, do you know that the Mara guy that owns the Giants is a part of the NFL's diversity committee? But yet the Giants have never had a black, is the only franchise in football to never have a black coach, but he's on the diversity committee. You got Rooney II, whose father instituted the Rooney Rule, is on that committee too, but he's sitting tight because he's got Mike Tomlin. So he's not going to say too much. Your father created the rule. You should be out in the forefront saying, this is how you, look at what we're doing. This is how you do it. Look at the success we had, but you're hearing nothing from him. So that's the other thing. And then Tony Dungy did an interview with Dan Patrick, where he talked about, he said NFL has a problem. And he talked about the whole race thing, but what he's trumpeting with the NFL, what he's pushing with the NFL is the whole process of deciding on coaches is flawed anyway. He said, there should be no hiring of any coaches while the playoffs are going on. And here's where he goes into detail. He says, because the reason why is if you're looking at like Raheem Morris is the defensive coordinator for the Rams, right? If you're looking to interview Raheem Morris, well, he's in the middle of a playoff run. He's got to squeeze in a day, which means he doesn't have, because he's preparing defensive schemes for each opponent they face every week. He ain't got time to study your organization, see what your roster looks like, and answer all those pertinent interview questions when you ask them about the organization. What could you do for the organization? Because he's focused on the playoffs. And so for Tony Dungy's point, and I agree with 100%, it should be a situation where they should wait until the playoffs are over with to decide on hiring head coaches. But here's the other troubling thing. Even in the midst of that, when all this stuff hit, they're still hiring coaches that are not of color, even after he filed his lawsuit. Now, Doug Peterson, to Doug Peterson's credit, right? He's probably the only one on that list that's been hired that is a justifiable hire. He's a Super Bowl winning coach. He's a quarterback guru. Jacksonville needs both of those because they got Trevor Lawrence, my guy from Clemson, who needs to be developed. Peterson's that guy that can develop him. Then he just won a Super Bowl. You're not going to, how you could pass on a Super Bowl winning coach. You don't pass on him. You know what I mean? Even though some of them don't always live up to the hype. I hate to say it about your squad down in Texas there, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah.
He is, he's a Super Bowl winning coach, but you know what I'm saying? So those are my thoughts on that. And one last round table on this. I'm going to get you guys' opinion. If you had a magic wand to wave to solve this problem, how would you solve it? Go ahead, Darryl.
All right. How would I solve it? Right. I think, first of all, I would, I hate to use this word reform, but I mean, they got to get to the root cause of this issue, right? I mean, they really need to look at not just throw like stuff like the Rooney Rule at it and throw, different buzzwords and terms, right? But really get down to the root cause of why this is happening. Why don't we have more coaches, to represent, the general 70% minorities that are in the NFL, right? Once you figure out the root cause, then you go from there. But I think right now, what I would do, I would get insight, man, from other coaches. I would get insight from players. I would just go and do my homework, right? To figure out, okay, like I said, what are the issues? What are the root cause? Why aren't we doing this, right? And establish a process like Tony Dungy is trying to do. Establish a process and procedure. And oh, by the way, not just establish it amongst the owners, but kind of get the NFL head office involved, the executives, the owners, and the players union, right? Does this work? Does this process work? And then go out and test it, right? But it needs a total revamp. It definitely does. I mean, and you look at, and I always try to put things in a corporate perspective, because that's kind of what I'm familiar with, but people talk about it, and I think this is likened to affirmative action, things like that, right? People talk about affirmative action. Affirmative action is old. It's old now. We don't need it. But, in my mind, and this is, this is my opinion, right?
This is the My Thing Is This podcast.
This is my
right?
Right. But in my mind, it's to get us a seat at the table.
Right.
Get us a seat at the table, and then let our credentials do the rest. And then let our, but if we don't get a seat at the table, that was in my mind, as far as affirmative action. If we don't get a seat at the table, if you're not thinking about us, and we never get a seat at the table, then we can't show you what we can do. Right. Right. Because we really don't have anybody else out there lobbying for us.
Right.
So get us a seat at the table. So that's what I think. I just think they need to look at the entire process from wing to wing and figure out where the gaps are, and get a good procedure and process in place, and and get buy-in from all the levels of the NFL on what they want to do going forward. Not just make it an owner's thing. It needs to be everybody, on down to the president of the player union, or even some of the player union. So that's
G Militant.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on the show again. And Darryl, I agree with you 100% in regards to the affirmative action. Okay. Affirmative action is never gone away. Okay. And in this particular instance, the NFL itself, it has to come from the top execs all the way down to the trainers, okay, and the medical field, because there's also a disparity in regards to those individuals in those C-levels. I think Tony Dungy mentioned it in his letter, that the C-level employees, such as your hospital physicians, your team trainers, your there's a disparity in those people also. So this has to come all the way from the top of the NFL, all the way down to those particular players, that there has to be revamped and overhauled the same way that an organization comes in and cleans house. This has to be cleaned up. It has to be cleaned up, and not just from the owner standpoint, because if you look at the senior owners, okay, you have your Jerry Joneses, you have your guy up in New England, okay, those
Kraft,
the Kraft, okay, they've owned their guys, the Rooneys, okay, they've owned these franchises for so long. And Troy, I agree with you. Rooney should be forefront with a stick in his hand, beating down doors, saying, "Look, man, it's named after my father. This is what we have to do." And for him, to sit back, because he has Mike Tomlin, but Mike Tomlin has been there 15 years. How long is he gonna last? Okay.
As long as listen, the Pittsburgh Steelers had a winning record every season since Mike Tomlin's been there. That's why he's lasting.
Well,
they put themselves in a position to get with a shot at winning.
Yeah, but you bring up a good point, and I know Gavin's still going, but Miami also had winning season with Brian Flores.
So, exactly. Last 2 years.
Exactly.
Last 2 years.
But if your owner wants you to tank games and pay you $100,000 to get Joe Burrow, then that's the reason why he got fired.
So, but getting back to my point too. Okay, from the top to the bottom. Okay, it has to be cleaned up. But I also think, Troy, you made a very valid point too, that the NFL Players Association, the players, okay, they haven't spoken up about this, this injustice, because they're there every day around these coaches. They know who's working hard and who's coaching up. So it just can't be status quo. We're just going to throw these individuals' names up here and see what sticks. They're not seeing what sticks. They're not even putting the names up. So we're not even getting our foot in the door, as Darryl had mentioned as well. And I think the Players Association, I think the referees, I mean, everybody, from top to bottom, and it has to be cleaned up. But we just can't go along and play along and stay silent.
Yeah.
Okay, we can't do that. I mean, we played that card before, and well, we've been playing it now. And you look at guys like Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed, who took the knee and see their careers. Well, players aren't going to take a knee right now for the coaches, but they can surely stand up, okay, and voice what they have to say about this, because you look at some of the coaches that are now in the mill talking. Brian Leftwich, okay, Brian Leftwich, hey, he's a former quarterback. He's been doing great down in Tampa Bay. Not to go back and say, hey, Peterson wasn't a good pick for Jacksonville, but hey, why not wait until all the playoffs, Super Bowls over with, and then start that process of coaching, like you said.
Right. The word on Leftwich is Leftwich didn't want that job because it was just too dysfunctional. That's the word out on the street, that Leftwich turned the job down because it was too dysfunctional in Jacksonville. But you guys have great ideas of what you would do. I'm going to share mine real quick. Because my thing is this, and this is my thing is this podcast. Your host, Troy Sampson. I got Darryl Wilson with me and Gavin Milligan today, two special guests live from Groove City, or not live from Groove City, but from my hometown of Groove City. Me and Gavin in the DMV area, and Darryl is down in the Atlanta suburb, Georgia area. And so we're on the podcast today. But my thing is this. This is what I would do to fix this situation with the hiring of minority coaches and minorities in general in the NFL, right? This is how you fix it. You have to fix it with exactly what Brian Flores is doing with legislation, because here's the problem. The problem is that you have egos. Everybody's got a certain amount of ego to get to where they are, right? Let's just be real about that. Especially when you're talking about people making millions and millions of dollars. You got to have a certain amount of ego in order to get to that level, because you're going to get people talking down to you, people treating you bad. You just got to have a certain amount of ego and drive to get there. Owners of sports teams are just like athletes, except for they in the business world. They got egos and pride. So owners want to win, like athletes want to win, right? Owners also don't want anybody telling them what to do with their money and who they're going to hire, right? It's my team. I do what I want with my money. One of the things I would do is, the first thing I would do is, to solve the coaching issue, is create a coaches union, okay? That has specific guidelines that protect them against things like racial discrimination. The second thing is, let this lawsuit go through. Let this lawsuit go through. If it gets to where this thing gets big, they got to go in front of Congress and all that kind of stuff. Maybe you'll see some changes happen. The second thing, or the third thing I would do, is I would challenge the players union, or work in a collective bargaining agreement with a little bit more leeway from the players union. Because on the surface, the players union, this is not really their fight, because they're the actual workers and they got their union covering that. So who they hire as coaches, the players union doesn't cover that. But I would put legislation in place, or change the collective bargaining agreement to allow for something like that, where they have some sort of say, not the final say, but some sort of say, and then protections behind that. Because if they speak up, you got to have protection, because all they can do right now is speak up. They can't, the collective bargaining agreement is probably prohibiting them from sitting out games. If they did it in mass, though, it would have more of an effect, because nobody wants to see scabs. We've been through scab seasons in NFL. We've been through scab seasons in NBA. We've been through scab seasons in
baseball.
Nobody wants to see a scab. So those things is what I would institute, but it would have to be, and I have to agree with Bill Roden, who writes for the Undefeated for ESPN, where he talked about it has to be done by force. You have to put some sort of legislation in, because they're going to find a way. And players and coaches have talked about this all throughout week ad nauseum, about how these owners are finding a way around the Rooney Rule. If you put legislation in place and processes, like you said, Darryl, you can't skirt processes and legislation. You can't skirt that. Yeah, I'm a billionaire owner. I can do what I want my franchise. But can you? Well, if you don't have a certain amount of minorities on your staff, you don't have a certain amount of this and qualified people, minorities and women, then you run the risk of either being fined heavily, losing draft picks, or even losing your ownership at all. Now, Stephen Ross, and this is where it gets tricky with Stephen Ross, the Miami Dolphins owner. If it comes out to be true that he did that, the NFL owners can vote together to take his squad away from him, like they did the Clippers guy, right? But here's the key cog in this. Chris Greer, the GM. If Chris Greer gets called to, if this makes it to court and Chris Greer gets called to the stand, and Brian Flores actually has proof that Chris Greer talked to him about this and was engaging in all this, all that kind of stuff, even though Stephen Ross denies it, word against word. But if he's got receipts from Chris Greer saying the owner wants you to tank these games, it's a wrap for Stephen Ross. So that's my thing on how I would fix that, because this is my thing is this podcast. I'm your host, Troy Sampson, Darryl Wilson, Gavin Milligan join us today. Topic number 2. We're going to jump here real quick to, I'm not going to get into Brady's farewell, not mentioning the Patriots, because, you know, he does what he wants to do, and I think he's hurt by that. But we're going to jump in. And, Gavin, I'm going to kick you off with this one. Talk about the HBCU Combine.
Thank you, Troy. Hey, Troy, this has been something that has been dear to me, and I've been following it, and I've actually been waiting for it. And it was last week, but you didn't hear about it.
Right.
Okay. It was last week. It was held down at the University of South Alabama. And it was the inaugural HBCU Combine, in which it actually brought in some really, really great players from HBCUs, and they had the ability to actually test the same way that the big boys do in Indianapolis. You know, they're going to be testing probably starting in March 1st and March 7th, I think is their combine.
Right.
So they held it last week prior to the Senior Bowl, which was played yesterday.
Right.
And it's the first time that these individuals, these historically black colleges and universities have ever had a platform where these athletes can get together and be analyzed. Their vertical, their bench press, their 40s, all of those things are now going to be analytically put into this database, okay? That when you start looking at numbers and you start seeing the gradings and draft picks and things of that nature, I think some of these guys can hold their stock, okay? And now this evens the playing field to that this combine now allows them to even their stock, go up in stock, because the last 6 years, 7 years, there hasn't been one HBCU draft pick, meaning it's 6th, 7th, 8th round. That's usually when you get an HBCU pick. But you haven't seen a 3rd round pick.
Right.
This is what this platform is going to do for them now. You might see some guys who were 6th round picks now be 3rd, 4th round picks, which is significant in money, okay, and you know, and all across the positions, man. And I thought this was a great deal. I mean, this is a great big thing for me. I mean, being a former college player at a HBCU, and knowing some guys who did make the league, but made the league not because someone that they had a platform like that. They were almost like a needle in a haystack.
Right.
Okay. But you know, but the NFL has found these gems. Okay. As a matter of fact, you know, looking at some of the Hall of Famers, some great Hall of Famers came from HBCUs. Okay.
It ain't some, it's a lot.
It's
a lot that
It's
came from HBCUs. Yeah.
I mean, Walter Payton was a HBCU. Okay. Mel Blount, Richard Dent, Michael Strahan, Jerry Rice. They all came from HBCUs, but these guys that I just mentioned, they were the few that made it, that made the squad. That, you know, okay.
If you really think about it, though, and I got to jump in real quick because you talk about HBCUs and the greats, right? If you really think about it, most of the Black African American NFL players that came into the league in between the 1960s and I would say the 70s, I would say 80% of them probably came from HBCUs. Because you're talking about Geno Shaw, Art Shell, you're talking about all the guys you just named, a plethora of them. Because remember, it wasn't until the money started getting big and college football was kind of waning a little bit. Because if you watch the ESPN 150, College Football 150 documentaries, right, you'll see they do a whole show of ESPN College Football 150 on the integration of African Americans in college football. They do a whole show about that. And so, back in those days, even back then, the coaching staff that developed these guys, those coaches wasn't back then eligible or good enough to be in the NFL coaches. Mm-hmm. Those kids, those guys, the Art Shells and the Mel Blunts and Michael Strahans, all these guys, they had a lot of talent, but they also had to be coached.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah. So I guess my question, here's a question that I have for you, for both of y'all, and then I'll let Darryl jump in too on this topic too. But my question is, we're in 2022, and we have to have a separate combine.
That's what I was going to ask. That's what I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be my question or my thought to Gavin. Right? It's like, okay, that's a great first step. Yes. That's a good first foot forward. But then again, you still are comparing HBCUs against HBCUs against other HBCUs, right? And not comparing them to the big boys. Now they'll go on a database where you can kind of analyze all that, but that's a great first step. I think the second step need to be, maybe say the top people from the HBCU Combine or just in general, they need to be right in there with everyone else on the NFL Combines, right? And compared with everyone else, right? To let people know, that the Dell States and the other colleges, can compete with Alabama, right? On the same playing field. But I think it's a great first step, but I think we need to take it another step further. What's your thoughts on that, Gavin?
I agree. Well, hold on there, Darryl. Okay, hold on. All right. The fact that this is the inaugural, okay, the inaugural HBCU Combine is of course the great step. But what I mean by it's good because we've never had that platform. Now, if we can invite those same players, and why does it have to be separate? As Troy mentioned, you could take these same guys and maybe stretch the combine out a couple more days because you're going to add more, you're going to add more people. So you stretch it out a couple more days, but everybody goes through the same interviewing process. Everybody goes through the same testing, the same time. When I was in college, a couple of scouts came down to Delaware State, okay? Only because John Taylor had been drafted as a sixth round draft choice from the San Francisco 49ers. And we were winning the MEAC championships. So there were people that I played with that only got those looks from certain teams, okay? Say the Redskins, which was close, the Philadelphia Eagles, which was close. Teams like that always came, but they only had like one coach or two coaches to come down. Okay. They test your vertical, they test your bench press, they test your 40. And it was like, you know what? Thank you very much. And that was it.
Right.
that was it. That you never had that real, or you had that real instance.
Did they even look at film?
Oh, there's film all over the place, Troy. They don't look at film. Hell, during the pandemic, okay, some of these guys that played their senior years on abbreviated schedules for a lot of colleges and in high schools and things of that nature, there's film on them. You can go back and look at film with YouTube and everything, and these guys are putting workouts on YouTube and things of that nature. There's a lot of Black talent, okay, at these HBCUs that right now have been either sucked away from the predominantly white colleges, or have had those experiences that have fallen by the wayside. I mean, I think everybody that played football has always had a dream of going to the league. I mean, if you put a pair of cleats on and never played football, I want to be a football player. I'm gonna do, make it to the
Right.
league. Well, I think this combine gives those guys now an opportunity to one step closer to fulfill their dreams and not be left out of that, of that traditional combine that they have, and or being that one particular needle in the haystack, like like some of the guys that have made it to the NFL without being drafted.
Darryl, final thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, no, that's what I mean. I think that's what I said. I think it's a great first step, right? And I think first of all that it can't just be a check in the box. Like that's what we're talking about with the Rooney Rule and some of these other things. It can't just be a check in the box because Gavin mentioned, right? These guys came down to Delaware State, kind of looked at their 40s and bench press, and I was like, okay, I seen enough, and I'm gone. Right. So we can't have that. You need the NFL teams have to send their top scouters to the NFL, to their combine, just like they do any other combine, right? And really, really look at it for what it is. Find the athletes that are out there and give them a fair share. Otherwise, it's gonna be another, we'll be talking about this in a couple more years that they're just going in there. We're not seeing numbers increase in the NFL, and they're just going in there and checking the box. And that's what we can't have.
Yeah, well, this was the first time that 32 teams were there, and everybody that was there tested in front of 32 teams.
Right. Well, my thing is this. This is the My Thing Is This podcast. I'm your host, Troy Sampson, with Darryl Wilson and Gavin Milligan today. Thing is Gavin Milligan. I'm sorry.
Probably Gavin.
Sometimes I get mush mouths on here, man. I'm sorry. My apologies. But my thing is this is and then just to wrap this up and put a bow on it, right? I asked that question in the beginning, why do we have to have it, right? In 2022. It's a legitimate question, but I also think that by having it, it created a solution. And here's the solution. Thinking about this as you guys are talking about this, right? You said all 32 teams were there, right? Or somebody or representatives, right?
Representative, yes.
One of the challenges is with HBCUs is that a lot of the HBCUs are not Power 5 schools. So typically the NFL Combine is centered around Power 5, Power 10, 15, top 20, 15 schools. Those are most of the players that get the invite. Every now and then you'll see a HBCU wide receiver or cornerback, offensive lineman, or quarterback pop up in the NFL Combine, right? You'll see them pop up. But by having the HBCU Combine, right? Now you get, because think about it. If I'm, say, Shiloh Sanders down at Jackson State, or Shador Sanders down at Jackson State, right? I get the bust of both worlds now. When it's time for me to, when I finish my junior year, time for me to go to NFL, I can now go to the HBCU Combine and be seen. And then I'll probably, because of my daddy's name, get picked up to
get invited to go to the NFL.
Right. So and this is also, here's the other thing about that too, is you can also then, based on the 32 teams that come to see you, based on their feedback, get another invite based on their feedback to come to the NFL Combine. Especially, and if you hold it strategic like they did now, where you hold it before the NFL Combine, now some players are on the radar for HBCUs. And they may end up getting that NFL Combine invite. I have my own personal thoughts about the NFL Combine, what it really means, but that's a different story for a different day, because game film tells you what you need to know, not measurables 40 times and stuff like that, because there's plenty of guys that ran 4.2 40s, but they ain't never playing the NFL. But anyway, that's a different story, different day. Moving right along. Because most of this podcast today has been centered around race. We got one last topic before I get into my special needs topic about race, and I'll let Darryl lead this one off, and that's Whoopi and the Holocaust.
Oh, wow. All right. Yeah. So, everybody know, I think this week Whoopi got, on a hot seat for saying that the Holocaust was not about race. Right. And the Jewish community came out, after on that, because it was about race. And just doing a little homework, Hitler Hitler identified the Jewish community as an inferior race to the other, German community and white supremacist community in Europe, right? And so it was distinct, it was identified as a separate race, right? But, Jewish is you either a descendant of a Jewish person or you study Judaism, right? And you abide by the Jewish laws, right? And that way you can become Jewish, right? But Hitler thought the Jewish community had as left-wing ideals and that they were dangerous and they were an inferior race. So, he went on and, the Holocaust, and we all know 6 million Jewish folks lost their lives. So I think Whoopi, and this is my thing is this podcast, and my thing is this, Whoopi, like most of us, when you look at a Jewish person and you look at another white American, you see them as white Americans, right? And if we were in, like she was explaining, if we were in a situation where it came to white supremacists and we were all in, together, and white supremacists came and was about to do something, right? They would look at probably the Jewish and the white American the same way, but they'll look at the minority different. And I think that was her point, right? But she said, she identified it with race, and that's where she went wrong. But that's because we're not educated on that, right? Because I would have said the same thing until I, after the fact went and did some digging and looked up some things, right? I would have said the same thing, not being educated or understanding. That Jewish is a race, right? So that's my take on. I think we need to educate ourselves. I mean, on down, I was talking to my wife about it. I'm like, if you look at a job application in the simplest form, you don't see Jewish on there, right? So what do they check?
Right.
What do they on the race? What do they exactly? Right. White. So as exactly. So as a society in whole, in general, we need to educate ourselves on these things, right? But she did apologize. I think it was sincere. And I also think, again, that her knowledge is, what I explained. She didn't understand, nor do I. She didn't understand that Jewish was a separate race. So that's my take on it. What do you guys think?
Well, first of all, let me just say this, because you mentioned your wife, my sister. Shout out to Elena Wilson, outstanding, probably the best principal in the Cobb County, Atlanta, Georgia area school system of Lindley Middle School. Shout out to Lindley Middle School and Elena Wilson. Go ahead, Gavin. I'm sorry. I just want to throw that in there.
It's quite all right. It's quite all right. Well, since this is my thing is this. My thing is this. Whoopi spoke Whoopi. Okay, she spoke Whoopi. If you've ever seen Whoopi on the View, she's probably one of the most outspoken hosts that's on there. She's been there since the conception of the show, in itself, and she was being Whoopi. And what I mean by being Whoopi was saying what Whoopi would typically say, and she said it not as a black and white. Okay, as black and white, as you look at the colors in the spectrum, she saw this as black and white. It wasn't until, like you said, Darryl, okay, that she looked back in hindsight when you look at the history and how Hitler had classified the Jews as an inferior race. So therefore, race does come into this. But she was looking merely at in a spectrum of color. She was looking at a black and white thing, because as you mentioned, there's on that standard form, there is no Jewish box. It's either white and or black. Right. And I think she was being Whoopi, and she probably could have slowed down her thought process a little bit before she opened her mouth. But it was TV, it was live, and she was being who she has been for the last 20 years on that show. She's been an outspoken host. There's been a lot of controversy, particularly when the McCain lady was there. And so they've had quite a few heated discussions and heated views on that show. So it was, it didn't come to a surprise, that Whoopi, would be the one, getting in trouble, as we called it, and suspended her without pay for 2 weeks. I mean, there's been some other, racial things that had been said on that same show, okay, particularly when that orange guy was in office, that there was no reprimand, or any disbanding or taking off the air. But my thing is this: Whoopi was Whoopi. Whoopi was just being Whoopi.
Got you. All right. So my thing is this. This is the My Thing Is This podcast. I'm your host, Troy Sampson. I got Darryl Wilson and Gavin Milligan on today. My thing is this about the Whoopi thing. I am, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm surprised because Whoopi is a really intelligent woman. And she's shown that through the course of her acting career, even outside of acting with activism, stuff like that. She's a very educated woman. And I was really surprised that she didn't see that when Hitler, everything that Hitler did was, and you guys can go back and check the record books on this, it was about them being the master race. He always talked about them being the master race. And I'm surprised that Whoopi said that without taking the fact that she tried to make it seem as though it wasn't about race. She said it wasn't about race. She was more talking about religion, I think, because Jewish and Judaism, she mentioned Jewish, right? And a lot of people don't realize that Jewish is not a race, so to speak. It's more of a spiritual religion, if you will. And so I think she was speaking in terms of that because she wasn't looking at the people in that. At least that's what my mind gets out of this, at the people, but she was looking more at the religion itself, that he want to get rid of, because when you say Jew, you want to get rid of the Jews, right? And so, like you guys said, there is no checkbox on an application that says Jew or Jewish, right? There's no checkbox for that, right? And so you're right. So if something was to happen, say a race war broke out, and you put everybody in their respective corners, well, the melanated people will be in one corner and the lighter melanated people will be in another. And a lot of our Jewish brothers and sisters will probably be in the other corner, not in the corner with us, right? Because if you look at the skin tone and the melanin, or should I say race, and it wasn't until, I think, and this is my thoughts alone, because my thing is this podcast, my thing is this, is you have to dig deep to really figure out, well, who's Jewish and who's not, right? Unless they have a typical Jewish name, or something like that. But if they, if you just catch them off the street, or like the real practicing Jews, like the Hasidic Jews and stuff like that, you can immediately see it because they wear the hats, their clothing, their curl stuff, all those things, right? And so, and to Darryl's point too, we gotta educate ourselves, because if you don't know, you don't know, right? It's just like educating yourself about other people, educating yourself about, whether it's educating yourself about other races of people. And we can have another conversation about race, because I think race is a made up construct. And it's funny when we talk about that, because my pastor this morning did a whole sermon, because it's Black History Month, on Blacks in the Bible. And he quoted scripture on this, where he talks about, in the scripture in Acts and other places, where we all come from one place. Mm-hmm. He talked about Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. He broke it down where, Shem came out, and it's strictly from the Bible. Shem came out, and his skin was known to be olive or dark olive, like olive color. Ham came out, he was definitely like a brother. He was melanated. And then Japheth came out, and he was a little bit more lighter. And he talked about where, each one of them settled down. Shem settled down in the Middle East. So that was the beginning of the Middle Eastern people. Ham settled down in Africa, started African folks. And then Japheth settled down in Europe, started Europeans. And so that's the way he broke it down when he was giving his sermon this morning, right? And so when you start looking at the context of that, and there's scriptures that says We all come from one blood. We all made of one blood. That's why if you cut, it don't matter if you cut anybody, even animals. What color is the blood? Red, right? So anyway, so that's that. I just thought that and I thought that she really was speaking straight off the cuff. I think because Hitler did make it about race. Like to your point, he did make it about race. And to your point, Gav, about people have said things on the show and get suspended. And you talk about McCain's daughter, right? McCain's daughter was actually one of the first people to come to Whoopi's defense when she got suspended, oddly enough. But it wasn't what you thought it was for. It wasn't for defend her and saying, she's not wrong, this, that, and the other. It was the suspension part and how it was handled, and it was in favor of Whoopi, but it wasn't in favor of Whoopi the way most people would think she would come to Whoopi's defense. It was more to benefit her and her ideology, is what she said. I forgot exactly what she said, but that's where that goes. And so we'll put a bow on that. We've had a lively show here. We've been a little bit rapid fire today. In our talks, but as you guys know, again, this is the My Thing Is This podcast. I'm your host, Troy Sampson. I have Gavin, Milligan, and Darryl Wilson on with me today. And if you guys have heard my podcast before, you always know special needs is in my heart because I have a son with special needs, living with special needs. And so my last topic of the day is I want to talk to everybody and share everybody. I don't know if everybody's seen the video, and I'll try to bring it up real quick so you guys can see it. But there is a barber down in the Atlanta, Georgia area, named Ree The Barber. It's a place called Exposed Cuts. And this mom on Instagram posted a video of her son, who's living with autism, getting his hair cut by Ree The Barber. Well, we went through this early on, and we tried it one time, and after that, Joshua's grandfather started cutting his hair, trying to take Joshua to a barbershop, especially when he was in his younger years and he was still self-stimming, had a lot of sensory issues. It wasn't no way that dude was going to sit in that chair and feel them clippers on his head and do all that kind of stuff. And so for a while, my late father-in-law, Bert Thompson, used to cut his hair whenever he needed a haircut. But Ree took on this client, and his mom is named LaQuista Arena. And I'll say they're going to be a part of my shout outs when we get done. But she took him to Ree The Barber, and he couldn't sit still. He was moving all around. So guess what Ree did? If you saw the video, Ree cut his hair as he was moving. She would pick up games and everything. And so let me see if I can share my screen real quick and pull up that video and let you guys see that one example, because she's making the news and everything now. Hold on a second. Let me see. Is it coming up? Hold on, let me stop sharing my screen.
It didn't say you started screen sharing.
Okay, hold on. It picked the wrong one though. Hold on. Let me see. Okay, here it is. So let me know if you guys can hear this.
Yeah, I see a blank screen right now.
Oh, okay. So the video is not showing on your side. All right. So let me go ahead and stop it. Let me see. Hold on. Why is it showing my screen share is paused? Okay. Anyway, I had a video that I want to show. I'll figure this out. This is the whole video part of this podcast I'm going to be trying to figure out. But anyway, it's the video of showing Ree in action. He's up, he's got his iPad in his hand. He's on the floor running around. He's doing all these things. And it's funny because, Ree is being patient with this young brother. She is being very patient with this young cat. And so it's just one of those things that, we have to be mindful of how we interact with kids with special needs and stuff like that. And I thought Ree did a phenomenal job. I mean, she even got to a point where, how people get their hair cut, they use a razor to line them up. She even got to a point she was able to do that. And I said, like, when I saw the video of that, I was like, that's a straight razor. Is she worried about him moving suddenly? But what she did was the way she grabbed his head, he was still focused on his iPad. And while he had his head in that position, she held it like this and then trimmed him up so he wouldn't move. But nonetheless, every time he goes to get his hair cut, she does her thing. And so they've been on the news, and they've been on, I think, one of the national talk shows recently that I saw. But shout out to Ree The Barber. And, you know, parents live with children live with special needs, especially autism, have a tough time just getting basic services. And we need more barbers out there like Ree to be able to do that and show that compassion and love. Because most barbershops you go through is like locker rooms. And so, you know, if you got a kid that can't keep still, some barbers will be patient and some barbers be like, man, I hope they don't bring that kid back no more. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I just want to give a shot. So what you guys' thoughts on that?
But, I mean, that's commendable, definitely. But we talked about a little bit about this last time. So obviously Ree's a barber, right?
Yeah, Ree, she's a barber. She's a female,
And she's educated on the special needs of that individual. Some barbers, right? Unless they're educated on it, we'll look at, and we talked about this, you know, Troy, before, where, you know, where they're not educated on different things of a special needs child, and they just look at it as behavior.
Right.
Right. That's just a behavior problem. So I don't want to come back in my seat. I can't deal with this. This person is moving around. They're just not, you know, they need to sit still, you know, even probably get on the parent, make this child sit still. Right. So I think it's commendable. But I think also too, again, back to educate, you know, maybe some of our barbers need that, right? Some education on, okay, this is, you know, he's dealing with this. This is maybe how you handle it, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll go into it with a better knowledge and be able to act like more like Ree. And not just with barber, but I'm just talking about in general, right? And a lot of times I don't think, and maybe they don't know, some parents, maybe they don't know, maybe they're not, you know, like you and Paula, y'all clearly know, y'all in it, y'all agree, y'all do your thing. Maybe some parents don't know, or the child hasn't been diagnosed yet or something like that. They don't get that information over to the person providing service, which they could probably provide a better service if they understood what they were dealing with.
Right.
That's my thing, is this.
Right. All right, Gab, what do you think?
Hey, well, you know, I'm a big fan of your show, Troy. And you had mentioned Ree probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, this story. And I went back and I had a chance to actually look at the video. And it's absolutely phenomenal. He's running around the barbershop, you know, and she's made it a game. She made it a game as he was literally on the floor with the cape. Okay.
Right.
She's getting a little bit here. Okay. It's like she's getting in where she fits in, so to speak. His whole realm of his whole mind and what he's doing, because he knows he's not going to sit in that chair. Right. He is not going to sit in the chair. And just the way that she did her service and the patience that she had with him was phenomenal. But I think she has also educated herself, as Darryl was saying. You know, she took the time to educate herself, or the parent of that special needs child took the time to educate Ree on, look, you know, he has a disability, okay? And she took it upon herself to be like, okay, as a barber, how can I get into his mind and fit into his world? Because that's what she actually did. She fit into his world where he wasn't threatened. Okay, he wasn't threatened, and he was still, you know, moving around and doing what he was doing, but she made it a game. It was non-threatening, and the haircut turned out to be pretty bomb. It really did. It turned out to be pretty.
She be using straight razor and be putting parts in that man's hair, man. She be getting it in. Yeah,
I was surprised to see how the haircut, a fade, everything. She faded him up. It was tight. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you guys both for those great points. And my thing is this podcast. So here's my perspective on it. Well, number one, shout out to mom. You know, LaQuista, being an autism mom, she took it upon herself to educate Ree, for what's going on. And to you guys' point, right? To Darryl's point about not knowing or having a diagnosis, right? Some parents may not feel comfortable sharing it. And even if they know, they might feel comfortable sharing that information with the barber that they take their child to. And I think that makes a lot of parents reluctant. And so you see a lot of kids as they start to get older, especially boys just living with special needs, that may be a little bit more on a have a little bit more self-stimming and a little bit more other actions going on, walking around with long haircuts or haircuts that just don't look lined up because the parents just went and got some clipper, just buzz it all off and just keep it buzzed up that way, right? And so the other thing that stands out to me about this is shout out to Ree for being patient. Here's the thing that stands out the most, right? Ree is so comfortable in her barber skill that it doesn't matter how he moves. If you're comfortable doing what you do and you know how to do what you do, right? She is comfortable in her skill set to be able to cut this child's head and do it well with him moving. I'm not gonna say, I'll say some barbers, and growing up with us, Levin Lee and them, keep your head still, boy.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Some barbers are not comfortable with you moving your head around like that because they are so tuned in. But she is adopted. She's comfortable enough in her skin and her skill set to be able to cut this child's head on the floor, in a chair, him hanging off the chair. When I saw her pull out the straight razor, bro, I was like, man, this chick is comfortable.
Right.
She had a straight razor on his head, and I was like, if he moves, but again, she's taking time out to educate herself. Mom has educated her, and the biggest thing she has is patience.
Yes.
About that, right? Because we live in an era of you can't just walk into a barbershop now. You got to get an appointment, right? And then most barbers have a schedule, right? Some barbers every 30 minutes they have an appointment, right? So she's comfortable enough that maybe she might be leaving some dollars on the table, or she set it up to where, Mom, you come on this particular day because I don't have that many clients, or this particular day I'm gonna block out for him, right? Because she knows it's going to take her, instead of 30 minutes to cut his hair, it may take her 45 to an hour because he's moving around and all those things. And then, of course, over time, she'll be able to cut that down to back to 30 minutes probably because she's got the skill and expertise, and it's a common thing. And he'll get used to it too, to where, boom, that's it. Here's the other thing it's also doing, my last and final point. If she's actually in a, because, everybody goes to salons now, right? Where everybody's got their booth or their own private room, right? But if she's actually in a shop where she's in a room with other barbers and other chairs, right? My prayer is that those other barbers are educating themselves watching her. And my prayer is she's educating other barbers about this too, that she's around too. Because like I said, most places you go to, everybody's got these salon suites, right? So you go, you may book your appointment, you go to the salon, you got to be buzzed in or whatever case may be. And then your stylist or barber is in their own little, 4-window, 8x8 booth, right? If she's in a barbershop, even if she's not in a barbershop, I hope she's educating. Well, she's got to be in a barbershop because most those salon booths are small. And you saw how much.
That's a barbershop.
That's a barbershop.
That's a barbershop.
So again, my prayer is that she is, just by example, educating the other barbers, and then also schooling them in terms of talking to them too. So shout out to Ree The Barber. And speaking of shout outs, we're going to transition into the shout out portion of my thing is this podcast. But go ahead, Darryl.
Troy, real quick, just one thing on Ree. As you were talking, I was thinking about, she probably did some practicing on her own or something, right? I know she didn't just start, cutting that hair that way. So I bet she spent some time practicing on, okay, if they do this, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. This is how I'm going to handle this. Getting herself ready to to be an expert or to have an expertise in cutting special needs child's
You know what,
hair?
Darryl? I don't know, because this is her. I think this might be her only client, and this might be trial and error for her. She may have just learned this just by him.
Mhm.
By him?
Yeah,
Maybe.
she may have learned this by him,
Wow.
through him. And so he,
Okay.
God puts things in our lives for different reasons,
That's
different
true.
seasons, and maybe he put. Well, I know I ain't know. Maybe he put this young man in her season, or in her life in this season, for a reason,
Yeah.
because here the attention that it's giving is raising awareness of special needs. Think about that
Right.
now.
Right.
Even though it's as simple as a haircut, right? Now people are seeing, oh, young autistic young man is getting his hair cut by a fantastic barber. You got other barbers watching this now. She post every time on. I'm gonna get to shout outs in a minute, but on her Instagram feed, she's putting the videos of her cutting his hair. Her mom is sharing
Awareness.
videos of cutting his hair.
Awareness.
And so it's the awareness that's going on. So
Yes.
I'm gonna check that out then. I'm gonna check that out.
check it out. So we're gonna go to the shout out portion of the My Thing Is This podcast. Again, like I always like to do at the end of my podcast, I like to shout people out. I don't really like to do like super famous people that's already got followers and likes. I like to do the smaller folks, if that's the way to say it, but the small folks, people that I know, people that I follow, that don't have 1 million followers, or it's not a store, or whatever case may be. So I had to give shout out. So my first shout out is, because it's Black History Month, not only that, is to all our ancestors that paved the way for us as part of Black History Month. Okay, all those ancestors, right, that paved the way for us. MLK, Malcolm X, W.E.B. Du Bois, Carter G. Woodson, the whole nine that we talk about, that we learn in school, and Black History Month, which should be Black History Year, it shouldn't be a Black History Month, it should be just a yearly thing. And we can have another podcast to talk about how they're trying to ban all of our history out of schools, or take the slavery and stuff like that out of schools. Well, that's another topic for another conversation. So shout out to all of them, all of our ancestors that have paved the way for us, and those that are still doing it to this day, that are serving in those capacities, whether it's politically, religiously, whatever. Also, shout out to Trayvon Martin. I think his birthday was either yesterday or the day before yesterday. And I think Trayvon would have been probably 20, 21 years old, I think now.
Mhm.
In his 20s now. So shout out to Trayvon. I saw his mom post something on happy birthday to him. It's been floating around in social media. So happy birthday to Trayvon Martin. And then shout out to Exposed Cuts, aka Ree The Barber. She's a barber down there in Duluth, Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia area, down in Duluth. And she's cutting this young man's head with autism by any means necessary. Her Instagram handle is at Exposed Cuts, and that's EXPOZDTUZ Cuts on Instagram and TikTok. And shout out to the young man's mom, and she's on Instagram too. She's an autism mom, and it's LaQuista Arena, all one word, LaQuistaAERINNA, LaQuista, on Instagram. And so shout out to both of them. Shout out to the mom for just inspiring people, because when one of the things, and I'll get to the other shout outs in a second, but one of the things that is really, really needed in the special needs community in terms of parents, right, is to know that they're not alone. They're not just by themselves. And so, when we see LaQuista sharing her videos of her son getting a haircut by Ree, that's inspiring other parents to maybe find a barber that can do that, that can, maybe even bring other kids with special needs to Ree shop to get their haircut by Ree, or maybe inspire Ree to teach other barbers how to do that, what she's doing. So shout out to both of them. I'm gonna go local for the second one. I'm gonna shout out my girl Leilani Chase. Leilani used to, ironically, Leilani is a family friend. She used to date Devin. Devin, Gav, son. It was in high school at Archbishop Carroll. She used to date Devin back in the day, and so I follow her on Instagram, and she's got I shouted her out. What was it? A couple of podcasts ago. She just started a candle company, but she's got another company that is called Bargain Bay Buys. The word bargain, the word bay, BAE, and the word buys. And her Instagram handle is Bargain Buys, at Bargain Buys, and her website is bargainbaybuys.com. Again, her Instagram is at Bargain Bay Buys. And what she does is she's a shopper. She goes out and finds bargains. Dude, she posted one video on there where she found like some $450 shoes for like $90 at like Marshalls or somewhere. She's one of those type of ladies that goes out and finds these deals on high price items. And so she started her own website called Bargain Bay. I mean, she be finding some abstract expensive stuff, bro. And be like, she'll post it on her Instagram and on her website. And I'd be like, you found some Michael Kors? You found a Michael Kors purse for how much? That it was normally like $800. She found it for like 175, 200. So she goes out there and finds those bargain basement buys. And so she's bargain bay buys. And so she finds those buys. That's Leilani Chase, again, at Bargain Bay Buys, all one word. And then the last person is a woman that I actually stumbled across on Instagram who was a hip hop head. And she actually lives out in California. Her name is Dana, AKA Mac Fikes. And Dana is a author. She's a hip hop head. She's a motivational speaker. She's a yoga instructor. She's a Roddy owner. So she's got a Titus. And she always posts on Instagram with her Titus, right? And her website is Dana Mac. That's Dana, MACC.com, DanaMac.com. And she wrote a children's book. And the children's book is entitled The Pirate Who Loved Flip-Flops. It's interesting. Pirate Who Loved Flops, or as I say, it's Pirate Who Loved Flops, not flip-flops, but Pirate Who Loved Flops. Her Instagram handle is, one of them is at IDMac. That's the letter D, MACC. And then her other Instagram handle is Dana Mac, at Dana Mac. That's DANAMACC, at Dana Mac. So if you get an opportunity, check out these people that I just shouted out. Shout out to our ancestors. Shout out to Trayvon Martin. Shout out to Ree The Barber, Exposed Cuts. Shout out to LaQuista Arena, Autism Mom. Shout out to Leilani Chase, Bargain Bay Buys. And shout out to Dana Dane. I call it Dana Dane, Dana Mac Fikes, ID Mac and DanaMac.com. And they're also on Instagram. So shout out to those ladies. Check them out if you get an opportunity. And like I said, I don't, we could shout out like people, products that already got money, they got millions, but I like to shout out the little people, man. That's just me. And somebody may say, well, why you shout these people out? Because I can. This is my podcast. Right? Shout out who I want. Right? So, as a matter of fact, last week I shouted out, I think it's AG365, Armor Glory Faith, my man Terrence Jackson. He's I met Terrence at our church. He's a former Oklahoma Sooner. He played football at University of Oklahoma, but he's got a Christian clothing line, athletic clothing line, AG365. Funny story about Terrence, right? It was called Armor Glory at first.
Yes.
Under Armour came back and sued him, so he had to change the name. It was like, you smart. And because I bought some merch off of him, right? And I was talking to him when I went to pick up my merchandise, right? And we had a long conversation, bro. And I was like, you said Under Armour sued you? He said, yeah, man, because I had Armor Glory. That's why AG, he had to shorten it up with the name. AG, right? It's AG365. And so check him out on Instagram as well, at AG365. But he just came up with a new line, right? And them clothes is fire, man. So check him out. I think it's agfaith.com. I think it's AG365 or AG. I can't remember what I have to find it and get it for everybody. But if you're on Instagram, whatever, check him out, Armor Glory or AGFaith365, or you can just Google AGFaith365. You go to his new site, and I was like, he put out his new line on Instagram the other day. I was like, bro, this is fire, bro. I was like, oh, Snapples, this is fire, right? And so he sent me a note back, laughing out loud, right? And so, again, this is My Thing Is This podcast. I'm your host, Troy Sampson. This week I had my man Darryl Wilson, my boy Gavin Milligan, and we hope everybody enjoyed this podcast. And we're gonna be back next week. I don't know if these fellas will be back, if they want to be back, but I'll be back next week. I like to shake it up a little bit. And in 2022, I was like, let me start having some guests on because doing this by myself kind of feels like I'm just rambling a little bit. So I'm like, let me have some guests on and have some other perspective and stuff going on. So, this is the second week I've had a guest on. Of course, the previous guest I had your brother-in-law, Gavin, on the Big O. That podcast was fire. I got a lot of wisdom and pearls of wisdom. And then I had the guy on that got me started in the podcast, Kevin Williams, who is he has a podcast called The Real Talk with the Sixth Man. And he's the one that interviewed Jamal Jackson on his podcast. Jamal Jackson went to Dell State. He was the offensive lineman, played for the Ravens when you talk about HBCUs and Dell State. So Kevin actually interviewed Jamal Jackson on one of his podcasts. And so, keep this thing going. I got some ideas for some other things. I'm going to try to see if I can't get this video thing going so that these things can be on video, but I also got some ideas for some podcasts for the special needs community as well. I got a couple of ladies that are really, they in the mix. They got special needs children and they on the front lines, battling and fighting for their children every day. So I'm thinking about doing a podcast for them. Also just a little plug and to you guys to check it out and support a brother. I'm going to be on a panel of special needs. It's a panel coming up in August. Oh no, I think it might be this month. Let me go back and check real quick. To confirm to see when that is. I actually did a Zoom call with two of the ladies that I work with on CCAC, and it's going to be published as part of a series of panel discussions about special needs going forward. Hold on one second. Let's see. But this has been fun, man. This has been, great, man. It's always a blast.
I enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it myself,
fellas.
Enjoyed it myself.
Yeah,
well, hey,
definitely.
Troy, before we disconnect, can you give me the name of your intro music? I love that song, man.
Oh, I got to dig in the crates. There's a story behind that, man. There's a story behind that, right? So when I first started the podcast, right, I was looking for opening and closing music, right? And so I was like, well, man, let me go ahead and, I'm a Tribe Called Quest fan, right? So I said, let me go ahead and, use Tribe Called Quest as, my intro and outro music, right? But here's what happened. When I started doing more research on doing podcasts, fellas, come to find out, if you're going to use an artist's music, you have to get permission to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the music that you hear on my podcast, I found that on a stock music site. You know how people have stock photo sites? So you don't hit with copyright. Well, it's basically a free music site. And they didn't necessarily give a name to it. And so I just was clicking on them and found one and, was able to come across one. And I was like, cool. So I found that one and downloaded it, chopped it up in GarageBand. Because I mean, the actual song is a lot longer than what you guys hear. I mean, it's like 4 minutes long, man. So I had to cut it down to like maybe 1 minute and 30 seconds, the intro and outro. And so once I cut that down, I just added my voice to the beginning and the end of it, and then plugged it into my pod track as one of my buttons, and the rest is history. But I'll go back and look to see if it's actually a name. I'll go back and give you. I can send you the information on the website where it is. But yeah, that's a stock music. I can't. Wow. Like I said, I was going to do the intro to the Luck of Lucien from the Tribe Called Quest. Dun, 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 dun,
yeah.
Dun, 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 boom.
Dun, 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 dun. Right.
Yeah. Do that, and so I had to back up and take that off, because I would get in trouble for that.
Well,
So,
I like it, man, and it's a great way to start the podcast, man.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's playing, you just get a feel. You just want to bounce, want to bounce a little bit.
Right.
So I want to thank you guys for having me on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so one a quick shameless plug. I'm gonna be part of a summit called the Decoding Behavior Summit, and it runs through February 11th through the 13th. You can sign up for it for free, but on the 11th, I think these are all pre-recorded sessions. So on the 11th, myself, Pam Talley, are being interviewed by a lady named Sarah Whalen. These two ladies are actually on my CCAC board, and our topic is going to be inequities in education, how schools make it difficult for neurodivergent kids. And so Pam, I, and Sarah are going to be in an interview. It's like an interview style thing. We're going to be talking about that, and they're going to make that available to the public on February 11th. The summit actually runs from February 11th through February 13th, and it's going to be great. And I'll probably just do another plug, a little one-track plug on this, maybe a podcast plug. But I'll send you guys a link information how you can register for it. It's free of charge, so you don't have to worry about paying for it. But if you get an opportunity, just go out there and check it out, and let me know what you think. When I got the information back and got all the information and everything like that, I sent my wife a text. I sent her the page, or should I say the actual agenda page. Let me see if I can share it real quick and see. Let me know if you guys can see it. You guys see that page? There's a little girl and it said decoding. Well, actually, let me scroll. Decoding behavioral summit. So basically, it's just a topic of conversations amongst a lot of professionals, and I'm going to be on the 11th. Inequities in education, how schools make it difficult for neurodivergent kids. Myself and Pam Talley, and interviewed by Sarah Whalen. So that's going to be on there. So I was like, I text my wife this flyer right here. I said, your boy gonna be on TV. Yeah, well, it ain't TV, but it's online. I said, your boy. And she was like, oh my God. So yeah, so these are the things that I think God is pulling me to, these type of things. Like with this podcast for the ladies, I already do a dad's group on Wednesdays, the first Wednesday of the month, a group called Dadvocates, that we come together every first Wednesday of the month. And I did a presentation on safety. It's going to be a 3-part series. I found a great document on safety by the Organization for Autism Research, OAR. They put together like 140-page documents that goes over all the safety things you need to worry about for you when you have a child with a special need of autism, from childhood. They cover childhood, they cover adolescence, and they cover adult. And so these are tips about physical safety, environmental safety, physical and sexual safety, because our kids with special needs are vulnerable. They're 4 times more likely to be sexually abused than typical children, and just a bunch of stuff like that. So I did part 1 of child to 2 years old to 12 years old with my dad's on Wednesday. And so depending on what the pandemic looks like in March, I may do part 2, or we may do an outing. So, we try to do 2 meetings and then an outing. And so I'm just trying to, give back, what God has given me to share with people, and God has graced me and Paula with Joshua, just trying to give some of that back, man, to a lot of parents out there that either don't know or that are struggling. So that's what I'm doing, brothers.
All right.
I'll send you guys link information. Yeah. And, go check it out, register for it, check it out, and then let me know what you think. If you share it with other people too, when I send it to you, share it with others. I'll see if I can put it on social media as well, to share it out. But again, it's a pleasure having you guys and brothers on the call again, or on the podcast this week. Great show. Give yourself a round of applause for a great show. It's always on point. And listen, this is the My Thing Is This podcast. I'm your host, Troy Sampson, Gavin Milligan, Darryl Wilson, and we out of this joint. Thank you very much for tuning in this week. Be sure to tune in next week. Hit the like and subscribe buttons. And remember, the next time somebody says something suspect, tell them my thing is this, because your opinion matters. I'm your host, Troy Sampson. Have a blessed week, and we are out.
Great show, man. Great show.
Yeah.
Again, thank you, my brothers, man. This has been real. This has been fun.
My man, my man.